reaching a more ethnically diverse group is a little bit more of a challenge. At the university, we have about 10%, maybe 12% non-white um, population. So I think we're probably reaching about a proportionate number there, but it's when we look at people, for example, who come to see our pitch events and so forth, it's still pretty pale.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a challenge.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, it's I guess the first part here is observing it, and then we'll figure out what to do. But Kelly, you've traveled around to a lot of pitch events. What are you seeing as you travel around?
I would definitely go more with pale male, the ones that I've seen, and the women that are there seem to be less engaged. So they are showing up, but they're not participating as much. So male dominated certainly, and a little more diversity on the ethnic side, on the male side, but the women that I have seen don't seem to participate as much. So that's just my general observation in the mentor side as well as the mentee and pitching environment.
Sure. So, Jewell, you have a perspective not only as somebody who goes to a lot of events, but you also run a fair amount, and you're particularly focused on this topic. What have you seen as a trend over the last few years, both from events you're involved in and then ones that you just sort of attend and observe?
I agree with all the comments that everyone said. I mean, it's basically pale male, and then the women that do attend, they aren't really as engaged. And I mean, that's just, I don't know if it's just because it's a pitch contest and a lot of guys, they want to get together and start their projects, and so they are more active and feel more inclined to kind of start their own ventures, and then therefore that makes sense that they would try to find a pitch contest to participate in. But there's also some differences because there's different groups, like different silos I've seen across the country that hold their own pitch contests, but the difference is that they're not really included kind of on the national listing of pitch contests that are taking place. So that's a topic within itself because there's different groups and different silos that are doing their thing, but for some reason they're not being picked up on mainstream communications.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, we kind of promised 5 questions for you, Jewell, so I'm gonna hop into that too. But let's go. Okay. So when you kind of look, and you probably just got partly into that, which is, when you kind of look around, what are some of the sort of key community development challenges, particularly when it comes to diversifying the audience and including those maybe harder to reach audiences, or at least perceived hard to reach audiences? What are the challenges you find the organizations you're working with are kind of running up against when you first meet them?
Let's start with maybe a solution to some of the difficulties. I think the organizations that are running pitch contests or kind of startup ventures, I think if the leadership teams were more diverse, I think that they would also attract a more diverse audience. Because as we all know, like kind of attracts like, and then also when you have a diverse team, usually folks are involved in different circles. So what I try to tell event organizers is, try to bring someone or a few people onto the team that you don't necessarily network with on a normal basis, but that they're really good at what they do, and that they are part of networks that you don't they can cross over with networks that you're involved with, but also make sure that they also are involved with networks that you necessarily aren't involved with. And that actually helps solve a lot of kind of challenges. So it kind of all goes back to the planning team.
You know, it's interesting because I think we think fairly similarly on this. So what if I were going to boil it down to one thing in terms of community development, from what I've observed, is I would say organizers just are where they're having challenges is they're just generally late. So in other words, it could be late on doing their outreach. It could be, the kind of the normal thing in many of the events that I've been involved in or organizations has been that, everything gets fully baked and then they say, well, okay, now how do we market it? How do we outreach to, the various diverse communities we want to reach out to, as opposed to your point, including those diverse communities and individuals, key folks from the outset. So whether it's, likes attracting or the idea that the event or system is formed around and considering more perspectives, but that, when it comes down to sort of that from a sort of systemic issue, it just seems like, the idea that you're going to say, okay, we've fully planned this event, now we want to include people. It doesn't really sound like a
it
great
doesn't sound
methodology.
like a genuine, and it doesn't sound that genuine. Like, for example, right. Let's get away from like the pale male or the women. Let's take, for example, in May, I helped, basically I executed the Silicon Valley AgTech event. Yep. And what's interesting, if you look at our team, we were very diverse in terms of our skill sets. So since we were diverse in terms of our skill sets, we were able to attract a really diverse audience. So I'm really strong in strategic partnerships and alliances. John's really strong, like he's had years and years of taking some companies public. And then obviously we had a lawyer that was involved that helped a lot of clients or startups, protect their brands. And so naturally, we were able to attract like amazing, diverse community and groups of people, from like brands to people in ag tech to investors to legal teams, all that stuff. And it really is a systemic issue from the beginning. And Sure. If you just start with a really strong team, you can really attract the people that you're trying to get and expand and diversify your audiences.
That makes sense. And, even just the concept, what a diverse audience, just the idea of getting people who are agriculture and technology focused. I mean, that in
right.
and of itself is a pretty unique audience.
Yes.
So, and maybe we
Bill,
started down this road, but
Bill, can I make a comment?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Bill, this is Jay. That one of the things this brings to mind is something Bell Labs instituted back in, I don't remember, it was the 50s or early 60s, which is basically trying to create what they called random collisions of unusual suspects. And
yes.
The whole idea is that, they could drive more creativity, innovation, better problem solving by bringing together the people that didn't necessarily work together every day. And it's,
yes.
This whole concept is being followed by companies like Google and Apple, who are, creating their spaces in order to create these collisions. And it's something that Shay, the founder of Zappos, talks a lot about. And I think there's really something there. Is one of the challenges is how do you get people across a company who don't necessarily have a normal opportunity to mix with each other? How do you get them to interact and connect?
It's actually a really neat test of that going on a little bit to the west of you, Jay, in Worcester, Mass. A friend of mine is running a program with 100 very diverse people, essentially studying the art of science learning. And they're actually 100 people formed in 10 teams of 10, developing essentially solutions to transportation problems around Worcester. And they pulled people from government, from transportation, from arts, from all different backgrounds, but they're looking at that exact issue, and actually it sounds like being very successful at it. So let's see. So Jewell, so why, and it sounds like we've somewhat delved into this, but why do we want to make sure that we continue to build a more diverse population in terms of the folks that are active and engaged?
I think it's really important because, as you know, technology has broken down several barriers, whether it's work expertise, whether it's various communities that in the past have been segregated, whether it's been educational institutions. And with that being said, I think business models need to change and people need to adapt. And so since we have all these past divisions being minimized, it's really important to make sure that I think diversity is part of your strategy, because now, like for example, I'm in Germany, and people in Germany, they don't necessarily embrace social media, but they're realizing that they need to figure out a way to deal with it, because although they want to stay on their island here, there's people finding out about their products and services from all over the world due to social media. So although they want to just maybe be, and this goes with a lot of communities, they maybe just want a product or a service that's based on their, or focused on their city. But with the internet and with technology tools, people from all over can find you. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because if you get a good product, and even if you're locally focused, if someone from the other side of the world wants to purchase it, that's just great for your bottom line.
Right.
So you have to figure out a way to function locally and function like within the boundaries or the borders of what your community is made up of. But at the same time, you need to be able to make sure you can attract and engage other communities and people that could also benefit from the product or service that you have to offer.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of, and on the screen you don't see it, Jewell, but I think the others do, is I have Robin Williams in the Dead Poet Society, and during the movie he stood up on the desk and he got all the students and the whole point was to be able to look at things from a different perspective. And whether it's building a marketing plan to attract new markets, or being able to communicate with those markets when they want to access you, so many different reasons to have that different perspective within your organization, within your team, and whatnot. But I couldn't go through this without having a Robin Williams reference. So
of course. Yeah.
Does anyone have additional thoughts on why we want to make sure we continue moving down the road of diverse teams and diverse ventures?
I think that it's helpful to think about, and we've kind of done this perhaps not explicitly, but think about the things that we want to get in our community. So if we want to have creativity, there's a lot of research that says these, I forget the phrase you guys just used, but the collision of different perspectives and the cross-pollination. That's a different activity than becoming conscious of or reaching different markets. They can overlap because there might be markets that you wouldn't think of because you weren't creative enough in your input. But there are probably some other things that other reasons why you might want diversity in your whatever your community is, including being mirroring the community you live in, maybe addressing weaknesses in various parts of the community. So certain groups who might not be expressing their entrepreneurial energies as well. I mean, so there are a lot of reasons why you might want to have diversity writ large, whether that's gender, race, mindsets, disciplines, age. There's I think it's the age. I have friends out in Silicon Valley, and they're my age, and they're feeling really left out.
Yes.
But
I've heard that too. Yep.
And I look at the products that are coming out of there, and I'm thinking, and I'm talking to customer service reps out there, and I'm thinking, well, they're not marketing to me. and I happen to be of a group that's like the biggest group.
Right, yeah, baby boomers.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
That, but I'm. Yeah.
So
there's a certain amount of.
Go ahead,
there's a certain amount of independence between diversity and inclusion, right? Because you can have a very diverse community, but that doesn't mean that everybody's feeling included or that it's not fractionalized.
Right.
So
exactly.
I think there's two very different issues. One is, do we have a population that reflects the level of diversity that we think is healthy? And secondly, are we actually getting them to interact as a community freely and, without regard to, whether it's, gender, ethnic, organizational, or hierarchical?
Right. No, and that's,
I agree.
I think that's a great segue to the next question, which is, Jewell, as you're starting to work with organizations, what do you have a sort of a hierarchy that you focus on in terms of the things that you prioritize to get to help evolve an organization to build its community in a more diverse way?
Yeah, actually, believe it or not, it's a mixture of, as we talked about before, the leaders or the face of the organization, as well as the content that they are putting out there in terms of communicating what they do, how they do it, and why they do it.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So but having that leadership be more kind of my metaphor here is and on the screen we've got a scale, but the idea that the leadership is more in balance with the population they want to attract.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And if you have a product and you want to reach and expand or diversify, and you want like the older generation to participate, then obviously you need to have someone communicating via your social media channels, newsletters, whatever platforms you're using, that basically can be that voice and relate to the people or the organizations, institutions, that should be a part of, your network. I mean, because that's the best way to potentially engage. It's not like, though, if you have an older representative on your team that they can speak for all older representatives, but at least people start to trust it a little bit more and warm up a little bit more, and maybe, just pay attention over there. So same with,
So if we were going to go from sort of the theoretical, which we kind of are, to the practical, which is, I think we have possibly a real live example. You have fairly recently gotten involved in this large social media week in Berlin that my guess is probably wasn't as inclusive as it could have been when you walked in the door. So, when you walk into something pre-existing, how do it's neat theoretically to say, gosh, we need to be more diverse in our leadership, but how do you actually make that happen?
Play bad cop.
Gotcha. Cool.
No, it's been really interesting because, like you said, I'm coming in. They've had Social Media Week for the last 4 years. There's been the same advisors that really have been on board, the same leaders of the organization, and the reason this opportunity fell in my lap is the woman that basically runs the nonprofit that has been organizing Social Media Week for the last 4 years. She is pregnant and she just had a baby. So they needed someone, and they wanted kind of like a fresh perspective And I just kind of they stumbled upon me, I stumbled upon them. It's been really great. But yeah, it's been interesting because, everyone's kind of usually stuck in their routine, in their system. So, and they're used to doing things a certain way. And so I basically had to also come in and say, we have systems in place, because we have a lot of advisors and people who've been involved, and technology isn't necessarily something they want to use. Like, they're kind of used to just kind of telling someone what it is that they want or the program that they want, and then it's taken care of. And so kind of what I had to do this year was kind of play a little bit of the bad cop and say, we're on a global level. We have this technology platform, and in order for us to be able to kind of compete with all the other cities that are taking place, we really need to get used to using the systems that are in place and the tools that are in place to help us be more effective at what we're trying to accomplish for this market. And so, yeah. It's been great, and it's also been good because, since I'm here, just to kind of diversify also the content a little bit, and then also try to attract different audiences. It's been really great playing with the content, because I really feel when you organize events on this scale, it's a whole week. We're going to have about 120 plus events throughout the whole week. I mean, the way to really attract different audiences is really content that they're hungry for. And so what ends up happening is, we have 3 different venues, but in all the 3 different venues, instead of me just sticking to, okay, we're having all travel and leisure connectivity stuff here, we're having all society stuff here, we're having all work and enterprise stuff here. What I've done is mix up that content, though, because if people are kind of complacent and they don't want to move beyond, to the different venues, they're still going to get a shot of all the different types of content that's made up, to where, if they don't feel like moving from venue to venue, they're going to stay there, but they're also at the same time going to be enlightened, or hopefully have, content for thought in areas that they probably weren't focused on going specifically to that conference for.
And in some cases, they'll collide into people who are interested in other topics. So it sounds like a smart thing to do.
Right.
Cool.
And they'll realize that they actually have things in common with other people that maybe haven't worked in their same laterals before. And I think that the collision of thought processes, of even, I just think it's really going to spark a lot of collaborations post-event.
So from what you're saying, from the content standpoint, and this question may lead into maybe talking about that a little more, is so let's just play the scenario out that we've now built or the beginnings of a more diverse community. How do we keep them engaged? How, we've sort of got them in the door, but how do we get them to return again and again?
It's like the Cookie Monster. You get them to return again and again because you give them a snippet or provide what it is that they thought that they were coming there to look for in the first place as well.
So,
I'm
sorry, was somebody saying something?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that's I'm sort of mulling over as I'm listening to this is that we've got probably a lot of different types of communities we're talking about in our minds or out loud here.
Sure.
And so it's interesting to me as I'm listening to this to think about challenges I face at the university, where I have communities of students, I have communities of supporters of what I do with the entrepreneurship program. I have an alumni community. I like to have all those communities interact whenever I can create that, but I also have these formal structures that I don't have a lot of control over. You talk about leadership. In the formal structure, I can't control who's in the leadership. But it's occurring to me that I could change a lot in the informal structure around what I do. I could have advisory groups that are more diverse, who could take more leadership in shaping programs that actually make my job less difficult.
Yes, it would. Trust me.
Stop thinking that way. That's just crazy, Drew. Just stop that.
Work smarter, not harder. I'm telling you, that's the way to get the system working for you. It's less work, and it's great because everyone, just kind of gets the ball rolling in their direction, and at the end of the day, you just kind of piece it all together, and it's just a more dynamic existence.
Well, and it seems like it's also in broadening your engagement. There's also quite an opportunity to find the next sort of the future leaders, and to really have a good farm program that could develop in terms of having a much deeper bench in terms of people who could step in and take additional roles and whatnot.
And you guys, I have a really funny story for you. When I first moved to Munich, obviously, like I said, people gravitate towards and obviously the impact hubs are very prevalent in the States, So I obviously have been part of them and gone to investors meetings in San Francisco and all over the Bay Area. So obviously when I found out, I searched on the internet and I found out that there was an impact hub in Munich. So obviously I go there and I thought that, I'd be, embraced. I'm like, oh yeah, I've attended impact hubs, and it's completely different how they run it here. But the funny story is that one day they were having a pitch contest with the social impact lab folks here. And they really look for social impact companies. And apparently last minute, one of the jurors dropped out. So I got an email, and I was just going to attend because I found out about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would really love to attend this. And so the founder of the Impact Hub Munich sends me an email probably like 3 hours prior to the pitch contest and says, because he knew I helped, orchestrate like pitch contests and help startups and all that stuff. And he says, one of the jurors dropped out. Do you mind sitting in? Okay, so I was really excited because that's what I wanted to do in the first place. But, the German, they have to, feel they trust you and all that stuff. So anyway, so by default, I ended up being a juror. And the funny part is that I don't think they thought that I could add any value because all the pitches were taking place in German. And so this is diversity to its finest. Okay, so and my German is really bad. I thought it was good until I actually moved here and spent more time here, but it's really bad. But I can understand it, but I can't speak it. So here we go. I'm on the jury. It's me and a guy from the Technical Institute, the founder of Social Impact Lab, and then the Impact Hub guy. And to be honest with you, they totally had low expectations of me being able to add any type of value to this pitch contest. But what was funny was I focused on the team that was presenting, the materials that they had and used during their presentation. And obviously I had gotten the information before and slipped it in my translator tool, so I kind of also matched up what I saw with what the name of their company was and what they said the goal of their company was. So we go back to the room after the pitch contest is over, and so the guys, they're sitting around and they say, okay, we want you to pick your top 4. So we had to write it down, and believe it or not, we all had the same 4, except maybe there was 1 or 2, and we just had to kind of go back and forth over which was going to be the 4th one, but they were completely shocked. We came up with the same solution with completely different viewpoints, my viewpoint, and it was still the same. So that says one of 2 things. How one, it's really important to, the people that you probably least expect that can make a contribution, a real contribution, they probably definitely can. So like expand your horizons a little bit and just be like, okay, this person, I'm not really sure. I haven't really worked with them very much. Maybe it's not really in their area, but you know, that person can be of tremendous value because they're looking at things from a different lens, which is also very important for business sustainability. The other takeaway was that if people are good at what they do, no matter what language they're speaking or what background they come from, et cetera, they will be recognized and get recognized. And they will be successful. And I think that that's a piece that sometimes is missing. Like I do, you know, engage with a lot of different communities, and I hear some people or communities or women saying, but they don't have a woman, or they don't have a Latino, or they don't have an African American, or this or that. And all I always say is, okay, here's the criteria. This is what people have been doing in order to make these achievements. If you meet and do all that and there's still a problem, then that's when it's time to complain. Mm-hmm. But the key is to be excellent and good and focused at what it is that you're trying to achieve, no matter what.
Cool. Well, I think the next question I had, Jewell, was pretty much answered. The question was, how important is the event experience itself? And I think you said that it's critically important in terms of, and I almost think of, there are two terms that come to mind that seem really important to this. One is the idea of an antecedent, and then finally the consequence. So the antecedent was the promise that caused them to come to the room, and the consequence is certainly, you know, what happened when they did come to the room. And both of those experiences, you know, you could have this great promise that's not fulfilled, and therefore people don't come back, your community doesn't build, and certainly doesn't become diverse. On the other hand, you could not make a very good promise, and then you never get people to the door. So it seems like we need to have both of those working in concert, that promise and the outcome, in order to build the community. How would you respond to that?
I absolutely agree, but I also think, you know, I'm going to go back a little bit when we were talking about leadership teams, and and how sometimes people don't have control over the leaders. But what you do have control over is where you expose what it is you're trying to do. So let's say you can't change your leadership team, or there's these structures that have been put in place for a really long time, but you still have content, or you still have a program that you're executing. Just make sure that program is communicated across diverse channels if you can't change your team. Mm-hmm. So there's other ways that, you know, you can still attract. And to your question, in terms of promising and then they don't come back, or not promising and then they don't come and then they miss out, I think that also can be answered and potentially solved by just, again, focusing on, like, I guess the bullet points, or what it is that's going to happen, and making sure that people are clear, you know, what's going on, because there's always a way to attract people to what you're doing. It's really about how you communicate it.
And how audience-centered it is, I suppose, and that's why you have the upfront engagement with a diverse, with the group that you want to attract.
Right.
Yeah. Cool.
Right. I think, because, like, if I even look at this experience, for example, with Social Media Week Berlin, I'm sure a lot of people, when they saw her as program director, they're like, what the heck can she add to this program? I mean, like, she's not even German. She's not even German, but I made sure that they used my first name, Wilhelmina, which is German, but so there'd be some type of commonality. So they'd say, oh, her first name's Wilhelmina, so maybe we need to, like, just read on a little bit more. But either way, what's been interesting is, and the way I've overcome that challenge is, too, I don't know in the past if it's happened, but, I mean, I've programmed about 40% of the program with German content. And that content is really key content to help people kind of overcome some of the the challenges or the frustrations that they may be experiencing with social media, because my goal at the end of the day is to get people to embrace it a little bit more and realize that they can use it as a tool to help them versus it's something that's really, really bad. And the reason that there's this, Twitter is just not a big thing here. Twitter has had a really hard time here in Germany because, one, the language is very complicated. So, I mean, a German word itself barely fits into 100 and whatever. But, I mean, that's what my German friends tell me. So, anyway, so that part is true. But aside from that, very few people, business professionals or anyone, have a Twitter. And if you look here, the most successful people, they don't have high Twitter numbers. I mean, and they are running major corporations. So then that also got me to question, just because someone in the States, they may have a high Twitter, 24,000, whatever, does that really mean they're good at what they do? Or does that just mean that they're good at marketing what it is that they think they do? Because over here in Germany, they don't really care about that. And the more you talk about what you do, and the more they start to question if you know how to do anything. They just do it. So there's also been this interesting cultural dynamic that I've realized, and so the programming I felt needed to be to kind of obviously align with the culture in terms of its lack of loving these tools or loving technology, and the fact that people, they get 6 to 8 weeks vacation here. And I'm like, no wonder they're not spending much time on. They don't need to. They're relaxed. I mean, whereas in the States, you get 2 weeks vacation. I mean, everything's running together. Frustrations are high, and you're like, okay, where can I complain? I'll put up a fake profile just so I have some way to share something.
That makes a lot of sense.
So, yeah, so it's been really interesting. And it goes back to saying that the best way also to diversify audiences is to put ourselves in situations where we don't feel that comfortable, because the moment you do that, the moment you're also able to see what it is you need to do to attract people that may not feel comfortable coming to what it is that you're doing.
Perfect. So
if I can comment.
Yeah, please.
Just to comment on that last point about situations you feel uncomfortable. I think the other thing that you can do is to try to get people to develop some sort of interaction around things that they're personally interested in, because it breaks down a lot of barriers. Now, you can't always do that, and I'm speaking from a particular perspective, because that's a big piece of what we try to do, inside of a corporation, is get people, create those random collisions based on what's important to employees as people as opposed to as workers, right? What are your personal interests? What are your personal activities? What are your values? What are the things that you would like to do or that you do outside of work? And if you can get people to interact at that level, the rest of it becomes a lot easier. If you think about the brand new employee in a big corporation, the thing they're probably most worried about the first 2 weeks on the job is who the heck they're going to have lunch with. Right. They'd rather have lunch with a guy that they find out is a fellow Parcheesi player or fly fisherman or whatever it happens to be, rather than worry about, am I going to have lunch with my boss or the guy that sits next to me every day.
That makes a ton of sense. Absolutely. What questions exist? What didn't we explore that you were hoping we would? I guess what remains?
Well, how about, I don't have a question per se, but I wanted to just kind of summarize this out loud. Where I was thinking the big aha in this conversation for me was the ask. And I would break it into 3 segments, meaning in the prep, who you ask to be on your team and how you engage them sooner will make the ultimate success. Who you ask in a different capacity, meaning who's different from you and can add value, and then what you ask them to do. And I think asking people to do helps them come prepared and have a mission in the meeting, and it makes the event more engaging for them because they have a mission. And so I was just listening to all the different anecdotes, thinking it's all about the ask, when it's done, to whom, and what you're asking them to do that ultimately makes the event better.
Yeah, if I were restating that, I'd almost say the organizers need to resemble the intended audience.
Yeah.
Is that another way to say it?
Sure.
That probably depends on what your audience is. I mean, what the event is.
Mm-hmm.
What's a scenario where that would be different, where you would see?
Well, so let's say you wanted to say I wanted to engage the there are a couple of Latin student groups on campus. If I were having an event, it would probably be effective if I had someone from the Hispanic community in Hartford or New Britain who is a business owner speak there. I get that. But if I had a more narrow focus, say like I wanted to get them more excited about entrepreneurship in the STEM fields, I might have a harder time finding somebody that fits the profile of the audience that I want.
And
why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
Because
is it because you don't think that they exist, or is it because they don't exist, or we just don't know how to reach them?
Well, so those are three good questions, and my answer to all of those, the last one is yes, I don't know how to reach them. I don't know if they exist, or I don't know where they exist. So, yeah.
Luis Hernandez, he started Open Solutions. Be a really good prospect for you, Drew.
Right. Yeah, I was just making up a hypothetical thing, but yeah, that's good. Well, so
that's good. So those are the questions he asked, and then also I guarantee you, someone within the Latino networks, they know people that they look up to, and that they admire, and that they aspire to be. And so I'd say engage that group, and they would be able to, it goes back to kind of what we talked about before, but they would definitely be able to help direct you as well in the right direction.
So what I'm hearing here actually is that the questions are more important than the answers. In other words, as you're forming, how you engage people isn't with the answers. How you engage them is with the questions. And so it's about, if you're forming the steering committee or whatever, whatever the organization looks like. Yeah, but that it's much more important to go into that with the questions about, how should we do this and who should we include and whatnot, as opposed to here's the template, here's the framework. That may be limiting.
That's true. Yeah, because like right now I'm in the process, BitHOUSE, we're going to be doing something for trying to get kids in the D.C. area. We have about 150 kids that we're going to be engaging actually September 26th during the Black Caucus in D.C. And one of the things that we're doing over the next year is we are doing like a road show of a day in the life of panels, which basically will be curated with or contain like minorities who are in areas of STEM, so they can inspire youth to go into areas of STEM. And the other thing that we're going to be doing is it's kind of like a show and tell piece that's going to go along, like a workshop where we're going to like Google Glass, for example. I think that's what we're going to be doing on the 26th, where we have explorers that come and talk about and kind of show and tell like the Google Glass and kind of like how important it is, to utilize your personal life perspective and experiences in order to motivate yourself to do great things for yourself and your communities in areas of technology and different areas of STEM. And so the interesting thing about that is it goes back to, yes, people are out there and they're, like I said, they kind of operate in these silos. So there's all these different silos, like Latinos in tech, or Blacks in tech, or this in tech, or whatever, because they don't feel like engaged or included in some of the mainstream stuff. But what I always say, like I did with the NPR interview in January, is like, okay, yes, we figured that out, but what's next? How do you want to change that dynamic? And it's not just up to the event organizers or the leadership teams to reach out and put out content that's inclusive. It's also up to you to always have it on your mind that this is what you want to do, and seek out what it is in the information and the tools and the resources that you want as well. It's a two-way street.
So, if I can play devil's advocate, on that a little bit, one of the things that Drew painted a picture of for me was you've got certain small minorities represented within your community, and they're going to be most comfortable if you reach out and bring in content or examples that are like them. There may be a very different way to go, which is to try to make the community more inclusive, so that the ethnicity or the gender or whatever it is represented by the examples that you bring in or the content you provide, that goes away. Does that make sense? In other words, the more inclusive you are, the more those, the less you should need to cater to individual communities based on that expectation, if the whole community is all going the same direction.
But we have to be realistic, though, too. That's going to take like years to happen, right? I mean, because just in general, that's not something people walk around thinking about every day. Like, oh, I want to be inclusive. But the quick fix is, I think, kind of what we discussed is just seeking out members of your team or planning committees or whatever that basically fit into the team in a way, but they also kind of make the programming, or they're going to make, the experience a little bit more dynamic. And just in general, by them being a part of it, it's not a forced inclusion, but it's going to be something that it's a start. Because I just think
inclusion by design.
Yeah, inclusion by design. Because I mean, the truth of the matter is that I'm from Wichita, Kansas. I went to the same private school all my life. I was always the one that was different, but the way that I survived and what ended up happening with me was I went to school with the same people all my life. So what ended up happening was, over time, we just grew to see people for people. But what still brought us together was just the commonality that we went to the same place every day. You see what I'm saying? Like, and we just grew to, and so that's why I'm able to see people as people, and like, I'm really good at helping other organizations and people identify or dig deep to find something that they have in common with someone else, or a business or a brand or whatever, and build from that. Whereas the average person, I've found, automatically it's this radar that goes off, like, oh my God, that's too different. That's so different. I don't know how to incorporate that, or I don't know how to make them part of my leadership team, or I don't know how to relate, or if I want to relate, or if I want to invite them to dinner, or if I want to go out for a drink. You know what I mean? And so
Jewell,
I feel very,
Jewell,
yes.
I absolutely agree with your pushback, and that's why I couch what I said as, kind of playing devil's advocate. But
well, I love it,
in
though,
the long in the long term, the question is, do you treat the symptom or do you treat the problem?
You treat the problem. You obviously treat the problem.
Right. And to some extent, catering to sub-audiences is actually just treating the symptom.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The ideal experience you want to get to is you actually have one audience. It's diverse, but it's actually one audience. And so you have one agenda, as opposed to creating agendas that have pieces to satisfy each of the different constituents. So it's a different philosophy, and I'm absolutely not saying it's easy or realistic in the short term, but I think it's part of what people have to be thinking about, in terms of where they ultimately want to get their communities to.
And then also think about it this way, though. Just because you diversify your leadership team, that doesn't mean you have to change your content. Just think of it that way. Because the content, people all need the same content. I don't care what community they're from. They just maybe sometimes don't know they need that content. But they're not going to be drawn to embrace that content if there's not someone else standing by that content that says, okay, this is content that you need. Let's take, a lot of the advertising on TV, for example. Let's just use some of the pharmaceutical products example. So you notice that a lot of the advertising and marketing for these pharmaceutical brands, like now they'll have like a woman, and then they'll have a guy, but then they'll have an Asian, and they'll have a black, then they'll have a Caucasian. What's happening is within that, I don't know how many seconds, if someone happens to have their TV on and they're just glancing or walking by it, and they see and they're Asian, and they see this Asian woman that's like, oh my God, this was great, I was able to sleep. It's really interesting. They may walk backwards a little bit and be like, oh, what is that? So what I'm saying is, so they're not catering to
sub-audiences, or are they reflecting their overall audience?
So what they're doing is, I think they're not catering to anyone per se. It's just like the information is there, it needs to be there. And if, though, it's there and it's delivered from the mouth of, or supported from the standpoint of someone that externally they potentially can relate to, then they feel that, okay, this conference or this event is going to have something there that maybe could be useful to me.
Yeah, I agree. That's great.
So gosh, I hate to interrupt at all, because this is exciting and fun. It's actually 1 o'clock. It's 7 o'clock where you are, Jewell. And I want to be observant of people's schedules. So, as I heard what was being said, it sounds to me like there are probably stages of evolution, and depending on the community, that there may be a variety of stages included or not in terms of that evolution. But it certainly sounds like there's certainly a lot of good conversation going on, and some. It sounds like we have the water boiling, which is always a good thing when.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Conversation.
Yeah.
So, Jewell, would you
Bill,
mind? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really appreciate your bringing the discussion together, and obviously it's a topic near and dear to my heart, and sounds like everybody else's here. And if they would be willing to, I would love it if Jewell and Drew would give permission for you to send me their email addresses, because I would love to get their reaction offline to something else.
I was actually just going to ask Jewell if she would mind if I shared her contact info. I didn't do that on the slides because we roped her in last minute. But Jewell, any issue with that?
Gosh, you put me on the spot. Oh, I have to say yes. No, yes.
Well, you're such a wallflower. You're so shy. I figured it would be a problem.
Hey, I'm introverted. Believe it or not. This has been learned skills over years. My core competency is introversion. Trust me.
It's good to see you're trainable. And
yes,
Drew, how about you, Drew?
That's fine. Sure.
Cool. Excellent. Well,
hey, Drew, that didn't sound convincing. Come on, can we get another? Hey, yeah, that's fine, sure.
you want me to disclaim? Oh gosh, I guess
Yeah.
Actually,
yeah.
Yeah, and Bill, you're using my university address for this, right?
Hey, if that's good with you, yeah, that's fine.
DRL@ccsu.com. Yeah, so yeah, that's fine. I think this is related enough to my work there that. It's okay to use that. I have to be careful about what I use the state email address for.
So maybe we should get your Gmail then, just to be on the safe side.
That's fine too, and it's probably easier to remember. It's Drew Harris PhD at Gmail.
Okay. I'll email each of you a follow-up.
Yeah.
And
use his Gmail just in case we send some stuff that,
Are you putting him on a joke list?
No, I think it's true. He's absolutely correct. I understand where he's coming from.
Cool. Well, I will do that, and I really appreciate all the perspectives. I think everybody added a lot to the conversation, and I have the benefit of knowing each of you, and I know you'll each enjoy chatting with each other as well. So that's really cool. So I wish you all a great weekend, and thank you so much for participating.
Thanks, Bill.
Excellent.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.